Welcome back to Poorly Educated Today in the News, where the world's on fire, the gas pump's angry at me personally, and apparently every world leader woke up this week and chose chaos like it was the breakfast special. Segment 1. Operation Epic Fury and the Strait of Hormuz traffic jam. So let's start with the big one. Operation Epic Fury is now in full swing, and the Middle East looks less like geopolitics and more like somebody knocked over a hornet nest with a leaf blower. The US and Israel carried out massive strikes. Iran's leadership got decapitated like a bad episode of Game of Thrones. And now the Strait of Hormuz is closed tighter than a jar of pickles at my aunt's house. And if you don't know why that matters, about 20% of the world's oil goes through that little waterway. So now there's about 140 million barrels of oil just sitting there trapped on tankers like a floating Costco line. Oil prices already jumped near $90 a barrel, and analysts are whispering about 150 if things keep spiraling, which means the gas pump down the road is about to start asking me for my social security number and a cosigner. Now the administration says the goal is unconditional surrender from Iran. No deals, no negotiations, just full-stop surrender. Which in diplomacy terms is like walking into a poker game, flipping the table, and saying everybody else already lost. And the media coverage is fascinating because half the outlets talk about strategy and airspace control and deterrence theory, and the other half are just quietly calculating how expensive milk is gonna get once diesel prices go nuts. Because under all the war talk is the simple truth. If oil hits $150 a barrel, every truck in America becomes a rolling inflation machine. And I'm not a strategist, but when 20% of global oil supply gets stuck in a traffic jam, that's less a military maneuver and more like somebody kicked the entire world economy in the shins. Segment 2. Maduro in Manhattan. Now, while all that's happening, the United States also apparently decided to run the most aggressive extradition program in history and literally snatched Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and hauled him into Manhattan federal court. And that's not satire. He showed up in court and said he was a kidnapped president and a prisoner of war. Which is not usually the opening statement you hear in a narcotics trafficking case. The charges include narco-terrorism and cocaine conspiracy, and the administration says it was a law enforcement operation, not a military action. Which sounds about like saying a tornado is technically just aggressive wind. The United Nations immediately lost its mind. European allies are mad, and diplomats are scrambling because grabbing a sitting foreign leader and putting him in a courtroom is not exactly standard operating procedure. Now the real issue is nobody seems entirely sure what happens next in Venezuela. Intelligence officials are warning about cartels, militias, and foreign powers stepping in while Washington figures out a plan that currently sounds like a rough draft written on a napkin. But politically, this thing escalates fast. If capturing foreign presidents becomes normal, international politics turns into the geopolitical version of bounty hunting. And the funniest part is the media debate right now. Some networks are calling it bold justice, others call it reckless imperialism, and I'm sitting here wondering if the Manhattan courthouse security guard woke up expecting traffic tickets and instead got handed a deposed head of state. Segment 3. Tariffs, oil, and the inflation sandwich. Now, while all this global drama is happening, the White House also rolled out a 10% global tariff on basically everything imported into the United States. Everything. So now we've got rising oil prices on one side and tariffs raising supply costs on the other side, which economists call cost-push inflation, and I call the inflation sandwich. Because companies are already warning about it. Apple said supply chain costs are rising. Manufacturers are nervous, and retailers are looking at shipping invoices like they just opened a medical bill. The administration used a law called Section 122 to push the tariff through without Congress for about 150 days, which is basically the economic version of putting the car in gear before anyone in the passenger seat realizes what's happening. And the logic here is that tariffs protect American industry, which is true in theory, but when you combine tariffs with an oil shock during a war, that's like trying to save money on groceries while your house is on fire. The escalation beat here is simple. If energy prices surge and tariffs stack on top of it, companies raise prices, workers get squeezed, and suddenly everyone's paycheck starts feeling like it shrank in the dryer. And the quiet reality underneath all the political shouting is that global supply chains are extremely delicate. They're like those plastic lawn chairs at a family reunion. They look sturdy until one big uncle sits down and the whole thing collapses. Segment 4, DHS, Shakeup, and the Cabinet Blender. Back home in Washington, the Department of Homeland Security just went through what I can only describe as the Cabinet Blender. Secretary Kristi Noem testified before Congress earlier this week about DHS operations, and then 3 days later, President Donald Trump fired her and nominated Senator Markwayne Mullin to take the job. Now Mullin is a former MMA fighter, which means DHS might soon be the only federal agency where the secretary can literally choke out a policy disagreement. The official explanation involves corruption allegations and internal disputes, which in Washington language means everybody in the room stopped trusting each other at the same time. And the timing is incredible. This leadership change is happening while the U.S. is running a major war overseas, dealing with immigration fights at home, and trying to keep multiple federal agencies coordinated, which is like changing the pilot while the airplane is already in turbulence. But politically, this move makes sense if the administration wants someone more aggressive in the role. Mullin has the congressional experience and the personality of a guy who probably thinks oversight hearings are just another form of cage fighting. And the grounded truth beneath the jokes is that DHS is one of the biggest security agencies in the country. When leadership flips suddenly, it slows down coordination, resets priorities, and sends a ripple through the entire national security apparatus. Segment 5, Technology Wars and the Pentagon AI Fight. Now let's end on something that sounds like science fiction, but is very real. The Pentagon just blacklisted the artificial intelligence company Anthropic and labeled it a national security supply chain risk, which means the Department of Defense basically told one of the most advanced AI companies on Earth, "You're no longer invited to the war planning barbecue." The dispute is about how AI should be used in military systems, especially autonomous warfare and intelligence analysis. And apparently, the tech company and the Pentagon had very different ideas about how comfortable everyone should be with robot decision-making. Now here's the weird twist. The blacklist might actually help the company in the commercial world, because a lot of international customers are nervous about AI being too close to the military. So in a bizarre turn, getting kicked out of defense contracts might make them more popular. But the escalation here is serious. Artificial intelligence is quickly becoming the backbone of cyber defense, satellite tracking, and modern warfare. If the military and top AI companies stop cooperating, that's like trying to run NASCAR without the engine builders. And the quiet reality is that the AI race with China is already intense. So when the Pentagon and Silicon Valley start arguing like two neighbors over a fence line, that's not just tech drama. That's the future of warfare, arguing with the future of technology. In conclusion, the world spent the last week juggling a war in the Middle East, a captured foreign president in a New York courtroom, tariffs shaking global trade, cabinet shakeups in Washington, and an AI arms race that sounds like the opening act of a science fiction movie. And somehow, in the middle of all that, the biggest daily concern for most Americans is still the same simple question. Why does the gas pump look at me like it knows I'm broke